Good morning, everybody. Breaking news from overnight now. An SUV plowing into a crowd of pedestrians in Melbourne, Australia. 19 at least have been injured. 4 of them said to be in critical condition. Authorities describe it as a deliberate act, and police, they've arrested the driver. We're looking for more information on this, so we'll bring that to you as soon as we get it inside of America's Newsroom. Back here at home, though, however, first today, a victory lap, years in the making. Republicans and President Trump touting the passage of the largest overhaul of the U.S. tax code in decades. That party could be short-lived as Congress now must meet yet another deadline, and that is today, to avert a government shutdown. Will that get done? A lot to watch today. I'm Bill Hammer, live inside of America's Newsroom. Good to have you along with us today, and a big welcome to Laura Ingle today.
Well,
how are you,
thank
Laura?
you so much. I'm in for Sandra Smith today. Congressional Republicans passing their tax reform and taking a bow at the White House with President Trump. Lawmakers offering praise for the president as well as promises for what the new bill will mean for hardworking Americans.
It's the largest, I always say the most massive, but it's the largest tax cut in the history of our country, and reform, but tax cut. Really something special.
Mr. President, you fulfilled the promise you made to millions of Americans struggling in this economy. A middle-class miracle, and that's exactly what the Congress passed today.
What we did last night and what the House finished this morning means America is going to start growing again.
What this represents is a promise that each and every one of us made to the American people last year is a promise that is kept today.
This is a big day for America. This is America's comeback.
We're going to keep fighting, and we're going to make this the greatest presidency that we've seen, not only in generations, but maybe ever. God bless all of you.
Thank you. Chief White House correspondent John Roberts joins us live from the North Lawn with more on this. Hi, John.
Laura, good morning to you. There's a lot of political gymnastics involved in getting this thing done, but the president stuck the landing. Clearly, he is thrilled to have tax reform finally done. I think it's fair to say that this is the biggest moment of his presidency. And what is seen here at the White House yesterday, most of the Republican members of Congress arrayed yesterday outside the South Portico, going up the 2 stairwells on both sides. I mean, a real show of support and a very colorful photo op for the president as well. This was the big one for him. This was the centerpiece of his election campaign, and the president now hoping that good things will flow from what he insists will be a real boost to the economy, tweeting out this morning, quote, "The massive tax cuts which the fake news media is desperate to write badly about so as to please their Democrat bosses will soon be kicking in and will speak for themselves. Companies are already making big payments to workers. Dems want to raise taxes, hate these big cuts." The president read the announcement from AT&T that it was going to invest $1 billion in the United States and give each and every one of its 200,000 employees a $1,000 bonus. The president predicting that is just the tip of the iceberg. Listen here.
We're going to see something that's going to be very special. We're bringing the entrepreneur back into this country. We're getting rid of all the knots and all the ties, and we're going to see, you're going to see what happens. And ultimately, what does it mean? It means jobs, 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 jobs.
Not a whole lot of time for celebrating, though, because the White House had to immediately get right to work on getting an agreement to keep the government funded through the holidays. The White House is confident it will get a continuing resolution that will keep the government funded not for 2 weeks like the last one, but through until January the 19th. The bill that is emerging from the Rules Committee in the House also includes what are called pay-go waivers. Under the pay-go process, if the president puts in place tax cuts, there needs to be cuts to entitlements to pay for those tax cuts. The pay-go waivers waive those cuts. Not clear at this point, though, Laura, whether Democrats are going to sign on to this. And don't forget, because John McCain is in Arizona, not in the Senate, the president needs 9 votes in the Senate to get this through. It's not a reconciliation measure like the tax bill was. He needs 60 votes to avoid a filibuster. The White House, though, saying that if they don't get those pay-go cuts, it will simply mean that the president will delay signing the tax cut reform bill until the first week of January. Still a good chance they'll get them, and if they do, the president will likely sign the bill next week. Laura?
All right, John, what a week. John Roberts for us at the White House.
Certainly is a lot to talk about, too. Laura, with me now, Oklahoma Senator James Lankford, the Republican member of the Senate Homeland Security and Intel Committees. How are you, Senator? And good morning.
I'm doing very well.
To you
good morning,
today.
Merry Christmas.
And to you as well. Merry Christmas. Here is the Democratic leadership reacting to the tax bill yesterday.
We have a simple message for our Republican friends. Republicans will rue the day they pass this bill, and you can bet Democrats will make sure of that.
American people saw right through this brazen con job Republicans tried to sell them.
And now it is your turn. Rue the day and a con job, Senator. Your reaction?
I'm not sure any American's going to rue the day they get to keep more of their own money. That's really what this is. Some of my Democratic colleagues here believe that anytime you give a tax cut that you're losing spending opportunities. Really what you're doing is allowing people to keep more of their own money. They spend it the way that they choose rather than how the government chooses. They can save it, they can spend it. Both of those things help the economy. As the economy grows, more people have jobs, they make more money, more tax revenue comes in. So that's how this economic process works. This is not trying to destroy the government. This is trying to allow people to have more control of their own lives and their own money.
I know you did not come on today to explain their position, but why did not a single Democrat vote for this bill?
Obviously, they'll have to speak for themselves on it. A lot of the pushback has been that they wanted to be able to see tax reductions for those in the lower end and the middle class, and to raise taxes on the wealthiest individuals, and then to raise taxes on businesses, especially on privately owned businesses, small businesses, pass-through businesses. I heard a lot of statements to say we want to cut corporate rates and we want to cut the rates on the lower class and middle class, but we want to raise it on the other areas to be able to offset that. I just think that in this economy, with it being so slow and so down, everybody needs a tax cut. Everyone needs a reduction. Allow that money to flow. And I don't see a difference between small businesses and big corporations. Both of them need to have some tax relief.
You're part of a group, bipartisan group, also working on immigration reform this week, in fact. Did you win a Republican vote or two during those immigration negotiations to get them to a yes on taxes?
Actually, they weren't really connected. Jeff Flake talked often about he wanted to make sure that we were going to have a vote on DACA. Quite frankly, all of us want to be able to have some kind of vote on DACA. The president's been very clear on that, where the president said that President Obama should not have done DACA administratively, should have been done in law rather than just administrative action. So President Trump has put a deadline for the first week of March to have a legislative solution for DACA. But with that, you can't just do DACA. You've got to do border security. You've got to do chain migration, all the things that are around DACA. If you just try to work through the DACA process and ignore everything else, you're going to have another DACA problem in just 10 years.
Well, that might be the
so
target.
We got to solve it.
That might be the target come January. We'll save that for another day. President Trump repeatedly says he will not fire Bob Mueller. Yet, Senator Mark Warner, the Democrat from Virginia, said this just yesterday.
Firing Mr. Mueller or any other of the top brass involved in this investigation would not only call into question this administration's commitment to the truth, but also to our most basic concept, rule of law.
You see him often. Why would he suggest that?
I'm not sure on that. I'm going to have to ask Mark directly on it, because the White House has repeatedly said they're not trying to fire Bob Mueller. They're not trying to be able to take out the special counsel. Now, they want the special counsel to finish their work rather than drag this on and on and on, but they're not trying to fire him, and they've been very clear about this. And what Mark made the statement on there, the rule of law is important. I completely agree. The rule of law is important. The president should be under the law just like everyone else, but the president should also have equal justice under the law just like everyone else. And when there are individuals in the Mueller process that are blatantly political in it, it is right for Mueller to be able to fire those and to be able to examine any other individual. It's entirely appropriate for Congress to do the same. But again, the president's not saying he's going to fire Mueller. He's saying let's have a fair process, and I don't think that's too high of a bar to ask for.
Do you think Bob Mueller has a credibility problem?
Well, he's trying to clean up a credibility problem by firing some of the individuals on his team that had a blatant political bias against the president. You never want to have an investigator that has a political bias against someone that they're actually investigating. That's not a fair scale of justice. So Mueller can finish his investigation best by staying out of the media, avoiding leaks, and by making sure everybody on his team treats everyone fair.
So is that a yes or a no on the credibility issue?
No, I think he has had a credibility issue the last couple of weeks as more information has come out about it. I think historically he has not. He's always been a straight shooter on that. We want to see him keep that straight shooter focus and to be able to make sure that he finishes the work that he's been asked to be done.
You are pushing a new cyber law that would help coordination between the Department of Homeland Security, the intel community, and state elections all across the country to prevent fraud, cyber abuse in the future. Why is that necessary?
Right. Well, it's necessary because the Russians clearly tried to interfere in our elections last time. They didn't change any of the votes anywhere, but they were clearly trying to engage. They probed 21 different states in their election systems prior to our election last time. So my focus is let's help the states, knowing that the states are in charge of their own election, not federalize the elections. States run the elections, but let's make sure we're helping the states think through the process. Let's also make sure we streamline the connections between the federal government and the states. So if there's a problem in one of the states, somebody from the FBI can contact them quickly and say there's somebody trying to probe your system. And let's also make sure the state systems are auditable. 12 states right now can't audit their election systems after the election. I think it's entirely appropriate for every state to be able to say we can verify what happened in our state so that everyone in the country can trust the election outcome.
We will follow it, see if you get it through. Senator, thank you for your time. Have a great holiday, okay, whenever it comes around. James Langford.
Thank you. Merry Christmas.
On the Hill. Thanks. Laura.
And a lot to get through on this. We'll have more reaction to this historic bill coming up later this morning. Check out this lineup. Kentucky Senator Rand Paul later this hour, Pennsylvania Senator Pat Toomey, and we'll cap it all off with White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders. All that coming up this morning inside America's Newsroom.
Taking it right to the Christmas holiday, aren't we?
Yes.
Right up to the moment there. 11 minutes past the hour now. Another big story this hour. Deputy Director of the FBI set for round 2 on the Hill after an 8-hour marathon session this week. McCabe will be back in front of lawmakers after delivering what some of them are calling conflicting testimony. So what is that all about? Florida Republican Ron DeSantis leading some of that questioning. He's live in a moment here. Coming up, plus there is this today.
I hate to say this, but we essentially repealed Obamacare because we got rid of the individual mandate, which was terrible. And that was a primary source of funding of Obamacare.
Plus the individual mandate. It's hated by most Americans and most Republicans, I should say, and an important part of Obamacare, now repealed in the new tax reform law. Why Republicans say it is the beginning of the end for Obamacare.
Also, watch the UN today. Law expected to vote against that U.S. decision to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital city. President Trump saying that the days of the UN lining up against the U.S. interests are coming to an end.
They take hundreds of millions of dollars and even billions of dollars, and then they vote against us. Well, we're watching those votes. Let them vote against us. We'll save a lot. We don't care.
The House Judiciary Committee is set to grill Deputy FBI Director Andrew McCabe today behind closed doors. Now, you remember McCabe spent 8 hours in front of the Intelligence Committee on Tuesday answering questions of charges of anti-Trump bias within the FBI. Lawmakers tell Fox News that McCabe's testimony conflicted with other witnesses, prompting Republicans to call for a new round of subpoenas. So we want to bring in Florida Congressman Ron DeSantis. He's on the House Judiciary and Foreign Affairs Committees. We want to thank you for being here. Of course, you have terrific insight for us. So first, we want to ask you, what does your committee hope to learn today?
Well, I want to know why he can't get his story straight. I mean, we have some very fundamental questions here, which are very easy to answer. How did the Russia investigation start in July of 2016? Was it because of the Trump dossier that was funded by the Democrats and compiled by Christopher Steele? Did the FBI pay Christopher Steele for that dossier? And then did the FBI use information gleaned from that dossier to get surveillance against associates of then candidate Trump? And here's the thing. Those are all very easy questions to answer, but witness after witness has stonewalled that. McCabe's testimony yesterday, by all reports, did not answer those questions. And so he needs to explain why he can't answer those questions. If he's not capable of answering the questions, he's got no business being the deputy director of the FBI.
You know, our James Rosen has been reporting exclusively that there's been talk that the House Intelligence Committee may decide to issue fresh subpoenas next week on Justice Department and FBI personnel. So what are you hearing on that?
Well, I think that's inevitable. I mean, you look at a guy like Bruce Orr, who was one of the top officials at the Justice Department working for Deputy AG Sally Yates. He has a meeting during the election with Christopher Steele, the same guy that the Democrats through Fusion GPS paid to do this discredited Trump dossier. And then, oh, by the way, Bruce Orr's wife works for Fusion GPS, and Orr meets with Fusion after the election. So how do you explain that conduct? I asked Rod Rosenstein whether those meetings were authorized in terms of his official business. Rosenstein did not answer that question. The fact that Orr has since been demoted leads me to believe or infer that those were not authorized meetings. And so that in and of itself is troubling. You got one of the highest ranking officials in the Obama Justice Department meeting with opposition people against a rival presidential candidate.
You know, who else do you want to hear from? This looks like it could go on for a little while, and maybe these, interrogations will last these long hours. I mean, up to 8 hours the other day. Who else is going to be on the hot seat?
Well, obviously, McCabe's here today, was at Intel yesterday. We want everyone in that meeting, that infamous meeting in Andy's office, Lisa Page, Peter Strzok. Remember, Peter Strzok sends a text message after the meeting to Lisa Page saying, I wish I could accept the scenario you sketched out in Andy's office that Donald Trump can't win, but we, meaning the FBI, can't take that risk, and we need an insurance policy. So how did that come about? What was the insurance policy? So clearly Page and Strzok need to be brought under oath and deposed about that meeting.
As we move forward and we talk about the credibility of Mueller's investigation and how it may have been compromised with what we've been learning, how much of that are you feeling at this point?
Oh, I mean, you look at this investigation from the start, and mind you, this is way before Mueller was ever reported. This is back in the summer and the fall of 2016. All these questions really undercut the legitimacy of this investigation that was being conducted by people like Peter Strzok. The fact that they won't answer these questions tells me that the answers that they would give, if truthful, would be bad for them and for the Bureau. And so here we are. But yeah, I think it casts an enormous cloud over what Mueller is now doing. And it's not necessarily Mueller's fault. It's just the fact that this thing was not handled very well. And I don't know to this day whether there was really any hard evidence to have been investigating any type of Trump-Russia collusion. They've been doing it for a year and a half and still no evidence of collusion.
All right, Congressman Ron DeSantis, we thank you for being here today, sharing all of that with us. It's been a whirlwind of a year, of a month, and we wish the best for you, and happy holidays to you and your family.
Merry Christmas. Thank you.
All right,
and it's not over yet. 20 past the hour now, the day after taxes. Will Republicans keep the government open? Some are threatening to hold that up if they don't get what they want. Well, what does Senator Rand Paul want? In his first live interview since he was attacked by his neighbor, he will make his case right here. Plus, tragedy on vacation. How did this bus crash in Mexico, leaving several dead, including 8 Americans?
We don't expect things like this to happen, We called all the cruise, departments. We called the consulate in Mexico. We called everyone we can possibly call, and nobody has any answers for us.
And we're getting an update on this week's tour bus crash in southern Mexico that killed 12 people, including 8 Americans. A preliminary investigation pointing to driver negligence and speed. Prosecutors say the driver lost control of the bus before flipping it and hitting a tree. The passengers were traveling from a cruise ship to visit Mayan ruins. More on this as we get it. Bill.
I know that all our colleagues on both sides of the aisle want to keep the government funded and attend to a number of other urgent priorities. I'm confident we can work together to do just that.
But will they? The focus on the Hill this hour is avoiding a government shutdown. Some Republicans argue they would vote against any bill that reauthorizes parts of the FISA law. They argue that law allows the government to spy on other Americans. And Senator Rand Paul has been a doubter on this law for 7 years. Member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. And, sir, welcome back here. Good morning to you, and a Merry Christmas to you. You bet. You look well. Are you well now since?
I'm doing better. I had a really difficult 5 or 6 weeks. I still am in pain, but it gets better every day.
All right, well, hang in there, okay? Nice to see you back here. You got a big problem with the FISA law. Are you willing to shut down the government if it's not
I'm never
drafted the way you want it?
Well, I'm never a fan of shutting down government, so that's not my intention. I am a fan of defending the Bill of Rights, though, and it's pretty important. Right now, we have a spy program that spies on foreigners. I'm okay with that. But it collects a lot of information on Americans. They won't even tell us how much, but we think millions of phone calls, millions of emails, millions of internet searches are caught up in this huge database, and it should not be used on Americans without constitutional protections. Right now, our fear is that they can sort through all this information and accuse you of a domestic crime, but you don't get the protection of the Fourth Amendment or of the Constitution. So this is very, very troubling, and we think you should at the very least have a warrant to search that database. And really, since it's collected with a less than constitutional standard, it really shouldn't be used for domestic crime. It should be used for what it was intended to be used, to try to prevent foreign terrorists from attacking us.
We were on this argument a lot, during the debate of the election of 2016, during the primary season especially. If the law, not to mince words here, but if the law is written as temporary, would you support that?
I think if we can agree to debate it. Right now, they're trying to conflate it or put it together with a spending bill, and so they say, oh, it's going to shut, government's going to shut down, we have to pass this. This is a trick of Washington to try to pass things without debate. This spy program needs to be debated. It's about the Bill of Rights. We need to allow amendments, and Senator Wyden and I across the aisle have come together. We have about 10, 15 amendments that we want to have debated and discussed, and we want the Fourth Amendment to apply to Americans. We don't want Americans caught up in our really honest fight against terrorism. We don't want Americans to lose their privileges or their rights as a consequence.
Specifically on the spending bill and government shutdown here, I know what your position is, but you sound like you've got a lot of hoops to jump through to get you to vote in favor.
Yeah, I think what's going to happen is there's going to be a short-term extension, like a month, which is much better. I'd rather debate it now. I would rather have debated it all year long, as we've been calling for. But a short-term extension is okay. I will absolutely filibuster any long-term extension. They try to do it for a year, they try to do it for 4 years, or they try to do it forever, which some of them want. There needs to be more oversight. And I think this recent controversy with the intelligence community, there's now allegations that both in the FBI and in the Department of Justice, there basically was collusion to try to prevent Donald Trump from becoming president. This kind of group of people that has such enormous power needs more oversight, not less oversight.
That is a strong statement. What's your evidence to back it up, Senator?
Well, we have now the FBI. We have an FBI agent talking to his mistress, and then also saying, Andy, that we met together in this office to discuss basically ways to have an insurance policy that Donald Trump doesn't get elected. I think that should be a fireable offense and sounds like collusion. But then you also have the Department of Justice, where you have a high-ranking official whose wife works for the group doing opposition research on Trump, being paid for by the Democrat National Committee. That sounds like a lot of high-ranking people colluding to try to prevent Donald Trump from being president. We've had this investigation about Russian collusion. Maybe we need an investigation about high-ranking Obama officials colluding to try to prevent Trump from being president. That's more serious than even Watergate.
Sir, thank you for your time. It's something to watch clearly. Senator Rand Paul, nice to see you back on your feet. Sound like you got your fight back.
I got it back, I think. Thanks.
Thank you for being here. Senator Rand Paul on the Hill. 9:30 in New York, Laura.
And the stock market about to open. The markets are now open, I should say, for trading on Wall Street. And futures indicate a positive start just one day after the House and Senate passed sweeping tax cuts. There you go. There's the board. Several companies, including AT&T, Comcast, and Wells Fargo, already on record saying they will pay special bonuses or give raises to workers because of the tax reform bill. So some big news there.
Indeed. So we're watching Dow 25,000. I don't know. Will it happen? I mean, it could. It seems like we're that far away from it right now. So watching that today in New York. Also this today. Overseas now, breaking news coming in. More clarification after police say a man deliberately took an SUV, plowing into a crowd, injuring at least 19. Several are in critical condition. We're getting more details on the suspect in custody. We will bring you that in a moment here. Plus, there's this coming up.
The individual mandate on health care, where you had to pay not to have insurance. Okay, think of that one. You paid not to have insurance. The individual mandate has been repealed.
And the GOP tax bill taking another swipe at Obamacare as they cut off a source of revenue for the law. Why Republicans say this is the beginning of the end for President Obama's signature legislation.
From overseas now, 19 injured, 4 of them critically after an SUV ramming into a crowd in Melbourne, Australia. Police say it was a deliberate act, and authorities now taking the driver into custody, saying that this is not his first run-in with the law.
He is a 32-year-old Australian citizen of Afghan descent. He is a person who is known to Victoria Police. He has historical assault matters and has a history of drug use as well as mental health issues.
So Chief Correspondent Jonathan Hunt live in L.A. with more on that. Jonathan, what are they saying right now in the early hours of this story?
Well, Bill, this was obviously terrifying for those involved, but it was not terrorism, according to police in Melbourne. The streets outside the city's iconic Flinders Street railway station were packed with Christmas shoppers late Thursday afternoon local time when a white Suzuki SUV ran a red light and sped up, slamming into pedestrians. 19 people injured, 4 listed in critical condition, among them a young child. Now, the driver was also injured and was arrested at the scene. Police say there is not a connection to terrorism and there is no ongoing threat. They said the driver is on a mental health plan and receiving treatment for mental illness. Local officials expressed horror at the attack.
This is horrific, it's evil, but we are not defined by these sorts of incidents. I'm confident that we will go about our business and we will celebrate Christmas.
There have, of course, been several similar incidents around the world directly related to terrorism. In October, a man drove a truck down a New York City bike path, killing 8 people. London has seen 2 similar attacks this year, both linked to Islamic extremism. In April, 5 people were killed on a shopping street in Stockholm, Sweden, and last December, 12 people died in a vehicle attack on a Christmas market in Berlin, Germany. The deadliest of all these attacks came in July 2016 when a man drove a huge truck into a crowd in Nice, France, killing 86 people. Police forces across America and indeed around the world are on alert for more of these kind of attacks as we go through the holiday season.
Thank you, Jonathan. Bill? Nice to see you today in California. Sure. Jonathan Hunt there in Los Angeles.
So the individual mandate is being repealed. So in this bill, not only do we have massive tax cuts and tax reform, we have essentially repealed Obamacare, and we'll come up with something that will be much better, whether it's block grants or whether it's taking what we have and doing something terrific.
All right, the president there, the Obamacare mandate that requires people to buy insurance or face a penalty will soon be a thing of the past. It was repealed in the tax reform bill, something Republicans have wanted to do for years. So what does that all mean for the rest of Obamacare? Let's talk about it with Zach Petkanis, a former Hillary Clinton campaign staffer and advisor to the DNC, and Chris Bedford. He's the editor-in-chief of the Daily Caller News Foundation. Welcome to you both on this very busy news day. A lot to get to here. I want to start with you, Zach, and ask you, what you think about the president's remarks on the individual mandate. He said it wasn't something he really wanted to talk a lot about while working on getting this tax bill done. What are your thoughts today?
Well, there's a reason he didn't want to talk about it. The Republican-led Congressional Budget Office said that this move, repealing the individual mandate, will increase people's premiums by an extra 10% per year, when he's talking about how this is the end of Obamacare, that's actually not true. Obamacare and the Affordable Care Act will remain, but people's premiums will go up. And Donald Trump and the Republicans are to thank for that when people see their bills beginning very soon. What he has done is destabilize the market. He has not ended it, but he has increased the premiums for millions of American families.
Chris, you've said it's a big move on a big promise. That much is for sure. But do you think there needs to be some clarification on this Obamacare point? Some people are still left confused today. I want to take a look at what Orrin Hatch wrote on an op-ed this week. Here it is. Repealing the individual mandate tax is the beginning of the end of the Obamacare era. Senator Orrin Hatch writing that the title of this, repealing the individual mandate tax, is the beginning of the end. So, as we take a look at that quote and take a look and dive deep into what he's saying here, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think that Obamacare has been collapsing, or at least having a lot of difficulties under the weight of its own costs and its own regulations, and how that has affected people's costs. Over the past few years, the marketplace hasn't quite rolled out as much as it would, and both conservatives and Democrats have been surprised at how small it's really been affected and the different people it has affected. Now, Donald Trump here and the Republicans did not repeal Obamacare like they said they did. What they did is they repealed probably the least popular part of it, the part where people are penalized for not buying insurance. That's an important step for Republicans, but it's not the end of the day. And if health insurance is still a big issue, the United States has got great health care. We've got terrible insurance. And if Republicans and Democrats can't figure out some way to lower costs over the coming years, and they've been rising since 1960, then I think voters will be upset.
You know, Zach, I want to circle back to something you said, the concerns that all of this will raise premiums by 10% a year. For folks watching and listening to this, you know, that is a huge chunk of change for a lot of people. Is this something you feel could be avoidable?
It's absolutely avoidable. I mean, it's something that the Republicans and Donald Trump were warned against by the Republican-led Congressional Budget Office. They were actually warned by the insurance companies themselves. They said very clearly, if you do this, we're going to have to raise premiums. And so there are a couple steps that people can take. One is rolling back this very dangerous provision that is going to hurt a lot of families, but also stopping the uncertainty that is being injected into the marketplace. I mean, that's why insurance companies have said they've been pulling out of the marketplace, because of the uncertainty created by Donald Trump and the Republicans.
Chris, I'm going to give you the last word on this. You've said that obviously this is a huge victory for Republicans, but it's still time. There's a lot more to do, a lot more working together to be done.
And premiums have been rising under the weight of government regulation for decades. Right now, you know, you have the bottom, the unhealthiest 5% of the population. They consume half of all costs. And the most healthy 50% of the population only consume 3% of the costs. Obamacare's regulations have pushed all these disparate groups, young people, healthy people, old people, and sick people, into much smaller and more constrained groups over the years through regulation, increasing costs across the board. And Republicans and Democrats have to figure out how to deregulate some of that to allow these costs to go back to their natural, more market-driven state.
Got to leave it there. Zach, Chris, thanks so much for being with us today.
We will have more, Laura, on that mandate repeal and the impact of the tax reform bill. Next hour, White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders is our guest live. So that's coming up about 45 minutes from now.
Lot to look forward to. Meanwhile, President Trump touting U.S. progress in the fight against ISIS.
We've unleashed U.S. military might on ISIS, and today the coalition to defeat ISIS has recaptured nearly 100% of the territory once held by the terrorists in Iraq and Syria.
Coming up, Illinois Congressman Adam Kinzinger on the U.S. military's first year with President Trump as Commander-in-Chief.